Hello, I'm back. Today I'm gonna be reviewing the 12 Kingdoms Sea of Shadow. I had this on my favorite books list. This is one of the books I've had, I think I mentioned for like a couple of years now. More than a couple of years. I think I got it when I was like 12 or something. I think I talked about it in the favorite books thing, but they only published the first 4 books in English. And I don't know if they're gonna publish the other ones. Okay, now the book 1, it actually centers around a teenage girl named Yoko Nakajima, who's like a regular girl living in Japan. She lives with her parents, where she is like pretty quiet. She doesn't want to get in any trouble. She just almost goes along with what everyone expects her to be. But then one day after school, when she gets called into the teacher's room, she ends up meeting this strange man named Keiki, who says he's been looking for her for a while now, that they both have to leave because their enemies after them, as they're fleeing this giant bird creature that he calls a Kocho, and it's one of the creatures he's been having this series of dreams for like the last month, and the Kocho was like in them. He ends up summoning more creatures, hence her sword saying only she can use them. He had made her agree to this pact that she doesn't understand, and then he gets another creature called a Hinman that he had named Zoyu to like attach to Yoko to fight the Kocho, and then they flee to this another world where they end up getting separated. She's left all alone, and now she's trying to figure out what's going on. Like, why was he brought here? What happened to Keiki because he just like disappeared. Now I kind of think that the plot is mostly strong. Like, it's like pretty simple. Now the world, as far as we know, only has 12 kingdoms, and so she spends the most time in like Ko, towards the and like the later middle towards the end she ends up in and to try and get more answers. Well, the book isn't super heavy on fight scenes. There are a couple of them, but mostly it seems like they sometimes she shows the beginning and then just kind of glosses over them a bit. At one point, she ends up showing Yoko fighting like this giant bull-like creature. Like, we sort of get the fight scene, and then she mentions that there's other things like watching Yoko, and just kind of like skips over it. At one point, towards the middle, right before she meets a character named Rakusun, she brings up that she was being followed. She ended up meeting like these giant like wolf creatures, I think. It sort of glosses over the fight. We kind of get some stuff, but it doesn't go into like super deep detail about them. Well, I didn't mind because this book is more of like a character-driven book, with kind of like Yoko trying to figure out what's going on and like figuring about herself. There is like one specific thing that kind of bothered me with the ending, where she eventually learns like why she was brought there. Keiki is what's known as a Kirin. They are like these divine beasts who are the ones who choose the kings of each country. Now there's only 12 of them, one for each country, and he's the Kirin of K. And he had gone to Japan to find Yoko because she's what's known as a taika. It's somebody who was supposed to be born in their world, but she ended up getting brought over to like our world through what's known as like a Soko, which is when like the two worlds like smash into each other, and sometimes things kind of like cross between them, but normally the two worlds stay like separate. And so that was why he had gone to Japan and was trying to take Yoko like over there, but he's not very good at communicating like anything, and with the people trying to come after them, he didn't seem to have any time to explain to her anything. Like, he probably would have tried to explain more when they got to like safety, but because of how things were happening in the beginning, he didn't have any time. And so Yoko had gone with her friend Rakusun to the Kingdom of N to try and get help from the king. And so he started to reveal that Keiki had been kidnapped by the people who were after Yoko, and they had set up like a false Queen K and they take in Keiki to try and make it seem like she was a legitimate ruler, even though that's not the case. And the king was saying that Yoko can help like lead them in facing into K, and it wouldn't be seen as going against like the gods, because they would be like helping the queen instead of like going like against her in a way. I think that's how it's supposed to be. And so they get to K, and then the entire final battle just kind of skipped over. Like, they talk about going there, they see what's happened in K since the false queen took over, because there was a mention that a civil wars happened with people believing she is the queen, and they'll fight against the people who think she isn't. And so they get to the battle. There's mention that where it says Yoko's little sword from its scabbard pointed it in the direction of the oncoming troops. Her Kitsuru galloped through the air, never slowing, bearing her straight into the storm of knights that rose from the castle. And then there's a break, and then goes into like her fighting Keiki in the like deep in the castle. Like, I kind of wish that they had showed her like at least fighting a group of people before she found the chamber, because they had sort of like build up that she would have to like try and retake her throne. So I kind of wish that there was more to the final part of it. She finds him, they start talking, and then the book just kind of ends. Well, they're like probably doing the thing where she accepts the mandate of heaven. Well, because in the beginning, Keiki just kind of like glossed over everything, where Yoko didn't completely understand what she was accepting to, and so they kind of like redo it, and so she finally goes to accept. So I kind of wish that there was at least one final scene with like her confronting the false queen, and just, I don't know, I guess like just a little more wrap up with that. Like, have it be on screen. Like, they do have a little thing at the end where it kind of, there's like a quick overview of kind of the offense, like a little bit, where they call it like the Red Book of K. It's like a couple paragraphs. It's like a couple paragraphs of just like who the prophet queen was. Where she was the queen that Keiki chose before Yoko. So it kind of talks about like what happened to her, and then about her sister Joy taking over. And then it goes on about Yoko taking the throne, and just sort of about how after that she took the throne. But I kind of wish we got to see at least her walking through the throne room and sit on the throne with like her officials and governors like seeing her. And then it's also revealed who the enemy was throughout the whole thing. It's like throughout the whole book, Yoko keeps getting chased by like a bunch of the beasts in the world, and she doesn't know why, or like why they came over to Japan to try and attack her. And it's later revealed that the king of Ko had been going after her because he thinks that like Taika has like a secret knowledge of ruling, because the king of An is also a Taika. We get a scene where he starts talking about how he had been trying to rule for the last 50 years because he said perhaps I too was an unfit vessel to be king. And so it's like he grew jealous of the king of An, who was even like technically born here, but managed to have been ruling for the last 500 years. And so, like, I didn't find him that compelling of a villain, because we like never see the guy on screen. Like, the scene where he's kind of giving his waterfront about why he's doing it takes place in like a flashback where Yoko has this sword that can show her visions, and she's like using it to see him. And so she's just this whole rant. Like, for me, it just doesn't have that same kind of impact, because we saw him like once in person, but we didn't know it was him until like this scene, which is like a flashback to when Yoko saw him on the road. And then another time was when Yoko was being attacked. It's just like right before she met Rakusun, and she had killed some of like the demons and stuff being sent after her. And Korin had come, and she had like this bird on her shoulder that was being used as like a communicator in a way between the king and like Korin. And he's telling like Korin to try and kill Yoko, but she ends up just like stabbing her in the hand instead. So like the whole thing, it just kind of, I didn't see him as that much of a threat. He was also the one that had set up the false queen in K, because he didn't feel like, and so he tried to like kill Yoko and destroy K at the same time. Which a lot of people in the book also point out that's kind of like foolish. If they do kind of try to correct this in like the anime, where they gave him like a lot more scenes, so he felt more of like a presence than in this book. And also like Korin also points out to him that like that seemingly like there's no like secret knowledge that he assumes that they have, and that like just as many kings and queens in this world have lived for just as long and have done just as great of a job. Because you do start meeting like other kings and queens in this world, and like one of them has lived longer than like the king of N himself. There's just as many people who have ruled for like over 100 years, and have, well, except for like the king of Ko, I do kind of like the characters. Like I do think they were established pretty well. Like when you first meet Yoko, she's, like I said, pretty quiet. She doesn't want to cause any trouble. She just kind of like tries to be different things for different people. When we meet Rakusun, he knows that Yoko's being hunted because like the king of Ko put like a bounty on her to like bring her in. And Rakusun knows this, but he doesn't do anything, and he tries to help her anyway. And also he knows that she doesn't trust him, because she's had people in the book betray her before, and she thinks Rakusun's gonna do the same thing. He knows this, and he still tries to help her anyway. And then we also get the king of N, who apparently has left his castle multiple times without telling people that he was gonna be leaving, and then he ends up meeting Yoko, fights off the enemies that have come hunting for her, and then just brings her to another, like, inn and starts talking about politics with her. And then Anki, the king of K, comes in, and even though he technically serves the king, he starts to sass him, and seems to be kind of disrespectful in a way, but he and the king actually are pretty friendly terms, to the point, like I said, where they can just make these sarcastic jokes towards each other and they're not really like that insulted about it. And also like Keiki too, like I said, when he comes in, he's like pretty house, but also he just kind of like seems to think like Yoko's gonna go along with him, and he gets like mad at her for it. Like he barely explains anything even when they've had some time to like calm down. Like at one point he gives her the sword and kind of expects her to like be able to fight the Kotso. And then she just kind of like throws the sword because she doesn't know how to use it, and he like gets mad at her for it. Like later on he does like apologize. We don't see that much of him in this book. We do see more of him in the book 2, which takes place a couple years before this one. And then we see more of him in book 4, which takes place a year after this. And so it kind of like expands on his character a little bit. But like it's also kind of established him not being the best communicator is kind of a part of his character. Because there are a couple points in the book, other books he appears in, where he tries to explain stuff, but he's not that good at explaining anything, and it kind of causes more problems for people. But it doesn't seem like he's doing it in like a bad way, like he's intentionally making it hard for people. Like I think he does try to help, but he just isn't very good at trying to help people. And Yoko, she does go through like the most development in the book. Like I feel like Rakusun, he's like the first friend in the book. He kind of stays the same, and he's what's known as a Hanju, which is somebody born in this world who has both a human form and an animal form, and it's different for everyone. And so he can, like, his animal form is that of like a rat who's about the size of like a young child, roughly. He kind of serves the role of like of explaining things to Yoko, telling her about the world and what's going on, and he's the one who figures out who Keiki is and what's going on with Yoko. And Yoko, she kind of goes from being the shy, quiet girl to someone who's able to kind of like stand her ground and like learning to defend herself and figuring out whether or not she wants to be queen or going back to Japan. And she eventually chooses to become queen and stay in that world. The world of the 12 Kingdoms. I do kind of like it. I think it is pretty cool. Now, as I said, as far as anybody in this world knows, there's only like 12 kingdoms. I think they do mention that people have tried to like sail off and they've never been seen again. And the 12 kingdoms are Ho, Tai, Ryu, and Kei, Ko, So, Sai, Han, Kyu, Kyo, Ren, and Soon. Now, like I said, most of the book takes place in Ko, and then towards the middle end of the book, they go to N for a while. And the book kind of ends in K. Now, in this world, like I said, the rulers are chosen by the Kirin, but also people believe like the rulers have like a defined right to rule, that like they're chosen by like gods, and the Kirin are almost like sort of like messengers in a way. They call it like the mandate of heaven, where they have like certain laws that the kings have to follow, and if they don't follow these rules that like the heavens set, then the kingdoms fall into ruin and they get punished for it. Now I think that stays pretty like consistent, but also it doesn't seem like the mandates are like perfect in any way, because you know, like, these people are just normal people and they have their own flaws and everything. Just like Yoko, when we meet her, like I said, she's just a teenage girl. She's in high school, basically, and she doesn't know anything about politics. The King of Ko was like this goudsman before he was chosen, and he would have rather stayed as a goud, he says. And it seemed, I think he was saying, like, no matter what he did, he hadn't felt like he was a good ruler of Ko. And he did seem to become jealous of the other rulers for succeeding where he had failed. And the Queen of K, the previous one, only lasted about 6 years. I think it was like she couldn't handle the stress of being queen. And she ended up like withdrawing in on herself. And she ended up giving up the throne in order to try and save Keiki because Kei was fallen. So it does kind of seem like they might choose people who have the potential to be king or queen, but it all just does kind of depend on who they are, because we do see rulers who had started out with good intentions, but they end up being corrupted later on in the rule. Kind of like what happens in book 4 with one of the rulers we see. And also, like, one of the biggest differences is like how children are born. Well, they're all born on these giant like white trees. Yeah, well, in like each field they have one giant tree that couples go to, where they tie like a ribbon around one of the branches and pray for a child. And like eventually a child will like grow and set this fruit, and will like eventually like hatch and they have a child. And it is kind of funny that like everyone in the 12 Kingdoms world is just as confused by like our world as like Yoko is to their world. At one point, she and Rakusun are talking, he's asking her if women actually like give birth to their children, and he finds it rather strange that that happens, and they seem to have like these mythical tales about Japan, where like he's saying that like the legends are that the houses are made of gold and silver, the land is rich, and the folk live like kings, and talking about people like running through the skies and covering long distances in the day, and apparently they have like magical water over here, where like people from the 12 kingdoms go for there, like drink it, and then they have like magical powers. It is kind of funny that they make Owl to be some like, sort of like mythical land with some like stories that seem to only happen in like this world. One of the things is that Yoko, the sword Keiki gives us like this magical sword that so efficient on the blade's surface. And like this is one of the things well most of the book would have been a lot easier if Yoko knew how to control it. Because she finds out who's coming after her like at the end of the book and why they're coming after her. But would have been a lot easier for her to know that a lot sooner if it like worked properly. But because she has no idea how it works, it takes a long time for them to figure out what's going on. And like even though we don't see that many of the other countries, I did kind of like so far of the world. Like later on, we do start meeting more people and seeing more of the other countries. Like in book 2, we go to the mountain in the center of the world. Book 4 details more of the Kingdom of K and what's going and like the landscape and the like I do think that this one's pretty solid for first entry. Like for the most part, I did kind of enjoy how it went. Like I don't have like too many complaints about it, except for like how the King of N was treated as a villain. Like mostly I wish he had showed up a lot more, so he felt more like a threat in a way. Well, at least got to hear more about him. Well, we got to hear some more about him, but like I said, his connection to. But I kind of wish that he at least had like one scene of him being like on screen doing stuff and stuff. Like we hear a bunch of stuff about him off screen, like through other characters. So yeah, I think that's my main complaint about at least this book. That I kind of liked it in the anime, where they kind of like flip flop between like characters a lot more. So they kind of showed more things like in a Kobe one of them would like flip to him and like. But I think that's about it. Yeah. Peace.